Assalamualaikum and hi. So today I will present you about the crime of aggressions. First of all, my name is Jannatul binti Hasan Aghare. My metric number is 060090. For the content, first I will start with introductions. Second, history of the crime of aggression. Third, the link between aggressions and other crimes. Fourth, the act of aggressions using self-defense. Fifth, humanitarian interventions. And lastly, six for the conclusions. First, introductions. For the introductions, a crime of aggressions or crime against peace according to Article 8 bis of the Rome Statute definition is the planning, initiations, or execution of a large-scale and serious act of aggression using state military force. A person who has authority to lead or supervise the operations of the state or military must act for the crime of aggression to be considered a violation of Article 8 bis. Although there is currently no internationally recognized definition of aggressions and no international court or tribunal that can try offenders, aggression is widely viewed as a crime under customary international law. The state parties to the court adopted the criteria and requirement for the International Criminal Court to exercise its jurisdiction over the crime of aggression in 2010 at the Kampala Review Conference. Some nations' statute laws consider aggression to be illegal, and they allow for prosecutions under the principle of universal jurisdiction. Along with crimes against humanity, genocide, and war crimes, aggression is a fundamental crime under international law, since it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the whole. Aggression was declared by the International Military Tribunal to be the highest international crime in 1946. The conventional wisdom holds that aggression is a crime against the attacked state, but it can also be seen as a crime against people who are killed or injured as a result of the conflict. The International Criminal Court (ICC) has formal jurisdiction over it, but the court cannot act until the parties of the ICC statute have agreed on both definitions of the crime and the circumstances under which the court may do so. Next, for the history of aggressions. Since the dawn of recorded history, people have engaged in warfare. The idea that aggressiveness is a serious moral transgressions and a breach of international law is a much older concept than the prosecutions of aggression, which only came about after World War II. Over the years, it has been established that only self-defense or the defense of allies justifies going to war, and that wars undertaken for territorial expansion are unjust. The theologians Emile de Vattel, who lived in the 18th century, provided the conceptual underpinnings for the criminality of aggressiveness, even though he did not advocate formal court proceedings for such offences, but rather the executions of offenders. Early modern Joshua theorists saw aggressions as the first wrong done to another nation, not the first military actions. Hugo Grotius, often considered the founder of international law, saw the principle wrong in aggressions in the violation of individual rights. The Nuremberg Worldwide Military Tribunal held the first international trial for aggressions under the banner of crime against peace after the Second World War. The provision in the 1990 Treaty of Versailles following the First World War for the institutions of a special tribunal to try Kaiser Wilhelm served as the closest, albeit flawed, precedent for the trial. The objective was to try him for a supreme transgressions against international morals and the integrity of treaties. After the Second World War, it became evident from the discussions that took place in the United Nations War Commissions and elsewhere before the London Charter was written that the idea that an act of aggression qualified as a crime under the then existing international law was not all widely accepted. The accused contentions that the Charter established new legislations and that the tribunal applied the law retroactively had to be addressed by the Nuremberg IMT. It rejected this argument by declaring that aggressive conflict has been illegal under international law since the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928. The tribunal believed that the solemn rejection of war as a tool of national policy entails the assertions that such war is unlawful under international law and that those who plan and carry out such a war with all of its unavoidable and terrible repercussions are doing so in violation of the law. The development of the aggressions definition began when the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution on December 11, 1956, reaffirming the illegality of waging aggressive war and emphasizing that aggression in general, rather than merely that of the axis nations, was unlawful. The the temporary fix that the Allies came up with in crime against peace quickly became ineffective, and by 1950 it had been abandoned. A code of offences against the peace and security of mankind was an attempt to codify violence, but it failed in the early 1950s. Aggression was overshadowed after the 1940s by other crimes under international law, particularly crimes against humanity and genocide. In the end, the crime of aggression is defined in the Rome Statute, as modified by the Kampala Review Conference in 2010, as the planning, preparations, initiation, or execution by a person in a state in a position effectively to exercise control over or to direct the political or military action of a state of an act of aggression which by its character, gravity, and scale constitute a manifest violation of the Charter of the United Nations. Only the most severe instances of state aggressions are subject to criminal prosecutions. Non-state aggressions, a concept that is much more contentious, is not included. The Rome Statute also limits the crime of aggression to state leaders who have the authority to set a state's policy, exempting even senior officials or generals who wage an aggressive war. Next, I will move on to the link between aggressions and other crimes. In stark contrast to crimes against humanity, genocides, and war crimes, aggressions involve the jus ad bellum, which presents issues of international law about state accountability for aggressive activities. Jus ad bellum refers to the conditions under which state may resort to war or the use of armed force in general. The commission of other crimes can be prompted by aggressions. The Nuremberg Tribunal, therefore, believed that to launch a war of aggression is not merely an international crime. It is the highest international crime, differing only from other war crimes in that it includes within itself the accumulated evil of the entire. Major wars result in a lot of suffering and nearly always involve the commissions of atrocities. Although genocide is now referred to as the crimes of crimes, there is no need to compete in an abstract pool to determine which heinous conduct qualifies as the biggest international crime. Another way that aggression is different from other crimes is that, unlike genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes, which can and frequently are committed by members of the armed force of states or entities with state-like characteristics, aggression can only be committed on behalf of states and as a part of state plans or policies. In addition, unlike these other crimes, aggressiveness is a leadership crime that can only be committed by individuals who are in charge of a state's policy. That's the act of aggressions using self-defense. According to Article 51 of the Charter, provides in part state that nothing in the present Charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations until the Security Council has taken measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. The use of force in self-defense is only permitted when it is required and when it is proportionate. That is, when it is not disproportionate relative to the necessity to prevent or repel an assault. The classic description of the relevant laws is provided by U.S. Secretary of State Webster in the Caroline incident from 1837. He explained in a letter exchanged with the British that an action must be justified by necessity of self-defense, instant, overwhelming, leaving no choice of means and no moment for deliberations, and that it must not be unreasonable or excessive, since the act justified by the necessity of self-defense must be limited by that necessity and kept clearly within it. The right to self-defense only comes into place when a state launches an armed attack. Self-defense against non-state actors acting independently of other states or in anticipation of their action is prohibited, as is self-defense against such non-state actors. The validity of a response to the threat of an impending armed attack has been left up in the air by the ICJ. However, the argument that preemptive self-defense is allowed to stop a threat from materializing is frequently rejected as being illegal under international law. Additional concerns about the rights to self-defense include whether force can be used to save a state's citizens in a state that is unable or unwilling to protect them, whether there is a right to self-defense against non-state organizations inside another state, on whether the armed attack must reach a certain threshold of intensity before self-defense is justified. For the next one, humanitarian intervention. The argument over military actions without Security Council approval to avert an ongoing or impending humanitarian catastrophe demonstrates the challenges in deciding whether to use force against a state or an individual. Whether operations like those in 1991 in Iraq and 1999 by NATO in Kosovo are legal under international law is a hotly debated topic among commentators. According to the conservative perspective, humanitarian intervention is prohibited by Article 2, Clause 4 of the Charter and can only be overruled by a just conscience ruling if it has the approval of the Security Council and the state involved, especially not one with preemptory status. A few dubious instances of humanitarian activity cannot establish a new rule of customary international law. Other analysts believe that customary law is establishing a norm that permits the applications of the obligations to protect them. They emphasize the power of the international legal community to determine ex post facto whether a specific exercise of the alleged rights is legal or not. Although it has not been universally endorsed, it is possibly the best course of action in this challenging area. Last but not least, there is a debatable position that unauthorized humanitarian intervention is permissible under current international law. This position is based on arguments regarding the interpretation of Article 2, Clause 4, and the continued existence of a customary law right that has not been eliminated by the Charter. So, for the last one, in conclusion, a crime against a state's sovereignty is essentially what Rome Statute means by the crime of aggressions. But in the modern world, war cannot be clarified as a conflict between states. Non-state actors are becoming more involved in armed conflicts all over the world, including non-state armed groups and companies. The current definitions appear to be limited to previous war, where state action and sovereignty played a crucial role in the act of aggressions. State actors are continuously losing importance in the use of force since the state's ability to use force unilaterally against other states is substantially diminished by the development of military equipment that is more destructive and the interconnections of the state. Additionally, the list of behaviors that constitute an act of aggressions appears to be out of date given that modern warfare only employs innovative strategies that do not necessarily entail the use of state military troops. As a result, the existing definition is inapplicable to the reality of ongoing armed conflicts, which allows non-state actors to employ force aggressively without concern for possible international legal repercussions. I think that's all from me. Thank you.